Another thing that's really worthy of pointing out is the so-called Islamic State is anything but Islamic. And yes, there is a war on Islam. Islam is very understood by many Muslims around the world to be absolutely 100% forbidden for you to forcibly convert somebody to Islam or kill them. Back in the medieval times, when there was Muslim empires, it was an absolute understanding and policy amongst the Muslims who were in charge at that time that those who practiced whatever religion were allowed to continue practicing that religion, and they were not even forced to pay taxes into the Muslim empire itself. However, if people wanted to practice that religion, they would not be able to derive the benefits of the tax system and so on and so forth. The bottom line is no Muslim in their right mind would justify going in and literally executing men, women, and children simply because they don't convert to your religion. These people are not Islamic. They are creations of the monster, which is the empire of the United States and all its cohorts in Israel and England in particular. And this monster is purposely created to justify the continuing insanity of the never-ending war policy, which is really the core of America. And that is exactly why I renounce my U.S. citizenship. This madness cannot be considered anything but the major threat to the world. I would argue that if you really want to know what's happening with Middle Eastern policy, then you must read Oded Yanan's A Strategy for Israel in the 1980s. Now, in that document, which is pretty much being played out to a T right now and has been for many years, there were serious objectives for Israel. And Israel's main objectives were to expand and grow in line with the Greater Israel Project. And in order for it to do that, there would need to be an excuse to justify the expansion of Israel. And in order to do that, we would have to sow the seeds of sectarian hatred and violence in the region. The number one target of this plan was Iraq. We've achieved that. That's not a failure. That's actually a success. Iraq is a failed state largely. It is an absolute basket case. Sectarian hatred is absolutely insane. We see the beheadings and all of this madness, and we think it's a disaster. No, it's not at all. In fact, it's all part of the plan to break up Iraq into 3 different states. When we look at Syria, we also find that the goal is once again the same thing: sow the seeds of sectarian hatred and basically turn that nation into a basket case. This is happening according to plan as well. Now, ISIS, funny enough, could stand for the Israeli Secret Intelligence Service. Many people are seeing the very big benefits to the state of Israel, the so-called Jewish state of Israel, by the breakup and the balkanization of the surrounding states. So we've been supporting ISIS in Jordan, in Turkey, through our proxies in Saudi Arabia and Qatar. There is absolute continuity between the policies of Iraq and breaking it up and breaking up Syria as well. It is beyond naive to suggest that the U.S. doesn't have its fingerprints all over ISIS. In fact, tell me this: why has ISIS never once, or al-Nusra Front or al-Qaeda, not once have they attacked Israel? In fact, ISIS militants are getting medical attention in the Golan Heights and in Israel itself. What does that tell you? There is absolute continuity, but the actual policy, just like the Project for a New American Century laid out very clearly, that a, quote, new Pearl Harbor would be necessary to achieve this goal of full spectrum dominance. You could never tell the American people, or the world for that matter, we're going to fight wars of aggression where we're going to have to invade and occupy, we're going to have to spend hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars to achieve the goal of full spectrum dominance, which is to control, absolute control over air, land, sea, and space and cyberspace. The American people never would have bought it, so you can't tell them that. You have to tell them a bunch of lies. And we see this over and over again.
If there was one physical subject, one material subject that we should focus on, in my opinion, it is very clear that the head of the snake is the financial system. We can argue till the end of time about who runs the world. Is it the Jesuits? Is it the reptilians? Is it the Illuminati? Is it the Freemasons? We can go on and on and on and on about this. But I don't think it is reasonable to even begin arguing about the mechanism that is used to exert this control. The mechanism is finance. The whole point of finance is to indebt, otherwise to enslave. What is a mortgage? I mean, what does that stand for? It's a death grip. So when you get a mortgage, you have a death grip held over you because you are in debt. You don't even own the house. The bank owns the house that loans you the money to buy the house, unless you're fortunate enough to have all the money to buy it outright. And even then, you can be taxed by the government, and if you fail to keep up with those taxes, the government can then take it from you. The whole system is based on a financial fraud, which effectively takes the power that we have, and it gives it to a tiny group of individuals who are running the world through the control of finance. With the infinite supply of money that we have allowed them to take, they have literally an infinite supply of money, and with that money, and from their psychopathic point of view, they have bought everything and everyone who can be bought. Let's take back control of the issuance of money, and not just on a national level. I'm happy to see in Denmark that you have your own currency, you don't have the euro, but on every country's level, they should be issuing their own currency in a transparent, non-usury based way in which it really, truly benefits the people. And in that way, we can literally free ourselves of the banking debt which is drowning us all, and we can stop scrambling for the crumbs from the table of these filthy rich psychopaths and live in a state of abundance just by changing this one thing. And John F. Kennedy did that about 6 months before he was taken out. He issued United States notes as opposed to Federal Reserve notes. I can assure you the powers that be knew the power of that act, and they took him right out.
This issue of interest, it is one of the major crimes in Islam. It is the only crime that Almighty God has announced war against. So it means that the people that take interest and give interest and write the contracts for interest, they have themselves made a proclamation of war against God. Now, if you're innocent and you don't know this, you're not responsible because you didn't know. But let me give you the principle behind it. Interest was a conspiracy that was created by a group of people that allowed a small group of people to wind up owning the properties of people for nothing. And after that, to not only own their properties, but to wind up owning and controlling the lives of even their children and their grandchildren for nothing. It's a conspiracy. And this conspiracy goes so far that through interest, different countries wind up in a situation what they call international debt. You've heard of foreign debt. So that countries are given money and they can't pay that money back. And so what happens, the people or the banks who have already been paid that money, another group of people go in there and take over the natural resources of that country, rule that country, run that country for hundreds of years on the basis of what? A debt that started out and built up interest. For instance, imagine a country borrowing 10 million and there being a 22% compounded interest on that every year. So you don't have to be a genius to understand that in a matter of 20 years, that 10 million winds up to be 230 million and it's still not paid. What do? They go and they start a civil war to make sure that people that are in place to begin paying that debt. And so imagine this not in one place, but all over the world, third world countries, undeveloped countries who enter these situations of debt and they wind up remaining in poverty and remaining under disease and other things through what? Banks, conspiracies that introduce this issue of interest. Now to bring it home to you and I, what does it mean? I buy a house. I'm a simple person, a hard-working person. Me and my wife are both working very hard. We buy a house for $70,000. Or let's say here in Australia, let's put it a different way. Let's say it's $150,000. So we buy a home for $150,000. And we're very sincere. And there's a 19% interest attached to that, which means that over a period of 30-year mortgage or 20-year mortgage, I wind up paying for that house if I live, if I continue my job, if I'm employed over a period of 20 to 30 years, for a $150,000 house, I wind up paying at least $280,000 for that same house. The worst thing about it, I must pay off the interest before I pay the principal. See what happens? So it means that for the first 15 years, I'm paying off what? Principal. I mean interest. And suppose I lose my job. I lose my job, my wife loses her job, I get sick, she gets sick. What happens? They come and take the house from me, is right? Even though I paid off $150,000, $160,000, they take the house from me. So that $150,000, $60,000 was for nothing, isn't it right? Then what do they do with the house?
They sell it for
They resell the house for more than what it was worth and give somebody else another mortgage for the house at maybe $220,000, and it just keeps on going. So this shows you that this crime is worse than slaughter. It's worse because it kills the spirit of people, their investments, their generations. And so the people who are engaged in that conspiracy, they have entered a war against God because it amounts to injustice and oppression. So for us Muslims, God made it clear to us. We don't write the contracts, we don't enter the contracts, and when we know about it, we try to find a way to get out of it.
رسول الله لا إله إلا الله محمد رسول الله